what role does a Bible translation play in biblical exegesis? Now, ideally, if one is doing biblical exegesis, the original languages are a part of the toolkit. You're using Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic to understand kind of the rhythm of the literature. But even when someone doesn't have access to the original languages, Bible translations can be very helpful in exegesis as well, at least in two ways. First, a translation can be helpful in biblical exegesis when you have several different quality translations. So let's say you have 3 or 4 English translations and you're looking at them at the same time. What's really helpful is paying attention to when those translations differ, when they translate a particular word in different choice of word, or the sentence itself is rearranged. Maybe part of the sentence is thrust forward in one translation, or it's delayed after a comma later. Those are really important differences to mark. What that should alert the reader to, again, if you don't have access to the original languages, those differences should alert you to there's something difficult going on in the language. Maybe it's a very unclear word, or a word that is difficult to translate into English, or perhaps it's a phrase that is a metaphor or some kind of idiom that wouldn't translate so well. And so different English translations are trying to render it in different ways. Or a difference in translation like that could indicate that the passage really could be taken one of two ways. The grammar and the words themselves could be understood in one particular way or another. And what you're seeing in different translations is a group of translators going in different directions as they translate. So that should alert us to something going on in the language, and turning to a good commentary, turning to other resources to dig in further, that's what the differences in translation might indicate to you, that you need to do some more digging here. Another way that English translation or translations of the Bible helps us in biblical exegesis is to help us focus on the target language. Now, every translation needs to, as it were, have interpretive bifocals, a set of lenses that help us understand the ancient context and the ancient language. But at the same time, we need familiarity with modern language, or the target language and the target culture and context. A good translation is always going to be faithful to the original language and context, but also faithful and apt, or have a fit with the target language as well. Really good Bible translations will both be faithful to the original, but also help us see how you say that in this language today. So that's actually an argument that we always need translations. We always need revised or new translations, because our language changes, our culture changes. The original text doesn't. But to communicate that clearly, we need almost continually to be doing translation. And looking at a good Bible translation will help us not only learn something about the ancient context and the original language, but it'll also help us to think about how to say that in our moment, in our language, in English today. So translations like the CSB spend a lot of time thinking about how are these truths understood in our context, in our time, in our language. How will readers best understand or hear what the text is saying? How is this metaphor communicated most clearly? When the original languages in Amos says God gave them cleanness of teeth, what does that mean? The CSB says God gave them famine. They weren't able to eat. And so it's trying to communicate clearly in our language and in our context what the Bible is saying. So in this way, a Bible translation is very helpful in biblical exegesis.